What if your own family plotted your death for money? Rachel thought she had a perfect life until a harmless family picnic turned into a deadly setup. Left for dead, she and her daughter survived the unthinkable. But the real shock came in court when every truth unraveled. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that prove sometimes the people who try to break you only make you stronger. I never imagined my ordinary life would unravel so violently, so completely. My name is Rachel Carter. I'm 37, and until a few months ago, I thought I was living the kind of modest, predictable life many people would envy. A steady job, a quiet neighborhood in Southern Oregon, and most importantly, my daughter Lily. My little sunshine with cinnamon curls and wide, curious eyes that reminded me life could still be beautiful, even when everything else felt dull. I work as a medical lab technician at a private diagnostic center. It's not glamorous, but I like it. There's comfort in the quiet hum of machines, in the routine of blood vials and test results, and in the rhythm of doing something that matters, even if no one ever really sees it. My shift starts at 6 a.m., which means every morning I wake up in the dark, pack Lily's lunch, braid her hair, and drop her off at school before the sun peeks over the trees. She always waves goodbye with both hands like she's afraid I won't see it otherwise. At 6, she's already more thoughtful than most adults I know. My husband Eric, or at least the man I used to think was my husband, works in real estate development. He's 40 now, just a few years older than me, but lately he seems like someone from another life. Distant, distracted, absent more often than not. He's always on a site visit or meeting with investors, yet he never has much to show for it. And when he's home, he's there in body, not in spirit. He stares at his phone while Lily shows him her drawings, nodding without looking. He mumbles responses to my questions, eats dinner like it's a task to endure, and disappears into his office without saying goodnight. I used to blame the stress, the market, the economy, but now I think it was something deeper, something colder. My parents, Gloria and Frank, live about a half-hour away, in a cozy cabin near Pine Hollow Lake. They're both retired and used to dote on Lily like she was their second chance at life. Cookies, bedtime stories, craft kits, walks by the lake, they were the kind of grandparents you read about in old storybooks. Lately, though, I've noticed something off. Gloria, once so warm and eager, now watches Lily with a strange hesitance, like she's examining something fragile. Her affection has cooled into politeness. Her hugs have grown shorter. Her smiles feel rehearsed. And then there's my sister, Diana. She's 5 years older than me, was a high school prom queen, and now thrives as a marketing executive in Seattle. No kids, no husband, just high heels, airports, and stories of champagne receptions in Milan. She calls me old-fashioned, with a playful laugh that's never quite playful. Diana is always perfect. And when she smiles, I've learned to look twice. 2 weeks ago, we were having one of those forced family dinners at my parents' place. Dad grilled ribs, Mom made her famous potato salad, and Lily was playing with her magnifying glass, pretending to be a nature explorer in the backyard. Just as we were about to sit down, Diana reached across the table, wine glass in hand, and said with a gentle voice that masked something sharper, "Have you ever considered letting Lily come live with me in Seattle for a while? Great schools, better resources, just options." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "She's 6, I said slowly. "She lives with me." Diana shrugged with a sympathetic smile. "Of course. I'm just thinking of her future. You're so busy. Eric's always gone. Maybe she'd benefit from a little stability." I laughed nervously, pretending I didn't feel the blood draining from my face. But that night, after Lily fell asleep curled up with her favorite bunny plushie, I sat alone in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of cold tea, and I began to replay everything. Eric's increasing detachment, Mom's quiet unease, Diana's offer, like scattered puzzle pieces slowly arranging themselves into a picture I didn't want to believe. The next morning, Lily and I were in the bathroom, our usual Sunday routine of messy hair, bath bubbles, and funny songs about shampoo, when she looked up at me, completely innocent, and asked, "Mom, if I don't live with you one day, will you still come visit me?" My hands froze. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She shrugged, eyes big and serious. "Grandma's friend's granddaughter said sometimes kids go to different schools in other cities. She said I might live with someone named D. D. Diana. I smiled through the storm roaring in my chest. No one's taking you anywhere, baby. You live with mommy. Always. But the seed had been planted. They were planning something. I just didn't know what. 3 days later, Eric came home past 10. I didn't ask where he'd been. I didn't need to. I'd already cooked dinner, let it go cold, then reheated it like a silent offering. He hung up his coat, kissed my forehead absent-mindedly, and said, "Sorry, investor dinner ran late." He said it so casually, so well-rehearsed. But as he sat at the table, I noticed something. Just a flicker in the glass of the china cabinet. His phone screen. A name had flashed. D. Call back. Not Diana, not sis, just Di. He turned away before I could confirm it, but I didn't need confirmation. My gut had already made the call. The next day, Lily's teacher, Miss Grant, pulled me aside gently during pickup. "Rachel, has anything happened recently at home?" Lily mentioned she might have to move. She seemed anxious. I thanked her, promised to talk to Lily, and walked home with my mind racing. I didn't speak to Eric that night. I didn't even look at him. Instead, I called my mother. "Has Diana said anything to you about Lily?" I asked. A pause. Then, "She just wants to help, Rachel." "Help how?" I snapped. "By taking my child away?" Mom sighed. "You're overwhelmed. Eric's been under pressure. And Diana, she's just thinking of what's best." I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. 2 days later, Diana showed up at my house, unannounced. She carried a latte for me and a shiny shopping bag full of children's clothes. "I found the cutest purple dress for Lily," she said sweetly. I didn't take the coffee. I didn't open the bag. "What are you doing, Diana?" She blinked innocently. "Just bringing a gift. Or buttering up a child you're trying to steal." She set the cup down with a little more force than necessary, but her voice remained smooth. "You're overreacting. I'm a mother. That means I don't get to overreact. I get to protect." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Children aren't property, Rachel, and you don't get to control everything." That night, I found an envelope in Eric's coat pocket. Inside were legal documents. Child custody consultation notes, a draft guardianship transfer agreement, naming Diana as the temporary guardian. I sat in the dark with those papers spread out before me. The walls of my home, the one I'd built with care, the one I thought was safe, suddenly felt like they were pressing in on me. I wasn't just imagining things. I wasn't paranoid. They were planning to take my daughter. But it wouldn't stop there. I could feel it in my bones. A storm was coming. And it was dressed like family. I stopped sleeping after that night. Not the kind of insomnia you talk about over coffee, but the kind that leaves you lying still in the dark, heart thudding, eyes open, waiting for a sound you can't name. I kept the custody papers hidden in a manila folder beneath the loose floorboard in the hallway closet, just beneath Lily's old baby blanket. Every morning, I kissed her goodbye, watched her skip off into her classroom, and then drove to work pretending like my world hadn't begun to fracture from the inside. I didn't tell anyone what I'd found. Not yet. I needed more than suspicion and a stolen glimpse at legal forms. I needed something undeniable, something that could withstand the slippery denials I knew were coming. Eric continued to act like nothing was wrong. Or maybe, in his mind, nothing was. He still came home late with tired excuses, still scrolled endlessly on his phone. Scholl still gave Lily distracted pats on the head, like she was a dog he wasn't sure he remembered owning. Once, when she showed him a drawing of us holding hands beneath a giant rainbow, he muttered, "Nice," without even glancing up. She tucked the picture under the couch cushion when he left the room. I waited until he was in the shower one evening, water roaring in the pipes above me, before I slipped into his home office. I didn't touch his laptop. He was smart enough to password protect it, but I opened the side drawer of his desk and found a crumpled receipt from a law firm in Seattle. The same one mentioned on the draft papers. I unfolded it slowly, heart racing. It confirmed a consultation 1 month ago. The same week, Diana had suggested Lily move to Seattle. I took photos of everything. The next morning, when I dropped Lily off, her teacher pulled me aside again. Her brows were furrowed with concern. "Rachel," she said, quietly but firmly, "Lily told me she's been having trouble sleeping. She mentioned someone said she might be going away soon. Away from you." I forced a smile. She must have misunderstood something. but I could feel my chest tightening, the edges of my calm starting to fray. I thanked Miss Grant, kissed Lily twice instead of once, and drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from unraveling completely. That afternoon, I didn't go to work. I called in sick, though there was nothing wrong with me that anyone could see. I sat at the kitchen table with the papers spread out again, reading every line like it might spell out the end of my life as I knew it. And then, in a sudden flash of clarity, I remembered something. Eric's coat. He always wore the same gray one, especially when he was heading out on investor visits. I walked over to the coat rack, reached into the inside pocket, and felt the crisp edge of an envelope. My breath caught. This one wasn't legal paperwork. It was a typed letter addressed to Diana. It had Eric's name signed at the bottom, and the subject line read, "Guardianship transition, next steps." It was short, but devastatingly clear. "I've spoken to the legal team. Once Rachel signs, we can proceed. The policy will activate within the week." Policy. I dropped the letter, heart pounding. I ran to the file cabinet in the hallway, pulled out our old insurance folder. Buried in the middle was a copy of my life insurance policy, something I hadn't looked at in years, except the version in the cabinet was out of date. I logged into the insurance provider's website using my credentials. It took 3 tries before I remembered the right password. What I found made me go cold. 4 months ago, the policy had been increased, substantially, from $500,000 to $3 million, and the sole beneficiary, Eric Carter. There was no mention of Lily. I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to breathe, trying to think, but my thoughts were spinning like loose marbles on a tile floor. Then I noticed something else. A digital signature. The witness, Diana G. Myers. The pieces were falling into place faster now. Eric had updated the policy. Diana had signed off. They had created legal drafts for guardianship. And my parents, quiet, complicit, were hosting more family dinners than usual. They were trying to make me feel surrounded, off balance, too overwhelmed to question what was being gently taken from me piece by piece. But now I had proof. I just didn't know what to do with it yet. 2 days later, Diana came to my house unannounced again, this time holding 2 lattes and a bag from a boutique store downtown. "Just some things for Lily," she said cheerfully. I saw this little lavender sweater and thought of her. I let her in. I had to. I needed to know what she would do next. She walked to the kitchen like she owned the place, placed the coffee cups on the counter, and set the shopping bag next to them. "You don't have to buy her things," I said calmly. "I want to," she replied with a practiced smile. "You're juggling so much. Let me be part of her life. She has a life, here, with me." Diana looked at me for a long moment. Then she leaned against the counter, one perfectly manicured finger tapping her latte lid. "Ratch, you need to stop fighting what's best." "What's best for who?" I asked, voice low. "She deserves more than this house, this small town, a tired mother and an absent father. I can give her better." "No, you can't," I said. "You can't give her love. You can't give her what she already has." Something flickered in her eyes. Irritation, contempt, maybe both. "Being a mother doesn't mean you own her." I took a step back, feeling my stomach turn. "Is that what you think this is about? Ownership?" Diana didn't answer. She just smiled, tight, cold, cruel. "Sometimes, Rachel, life gives you a chance to do something that matters. You just have to be brave enough to take it." That night, I couldn't sleep again. Every creak in the house made my skin crawl. I double-checked the locks. I sat by Lily's bed, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. She clutched her bunny close, unaware of the storm circling just outside our walls. Then came the phone call. It was my mother. Her voice was too bright, too chipper, like she was reading from a script. "We're planning a family picnic," she said. "This weekend, at Saddle Creek Ridge, just a short hike. The view's incredible this time of year." "Outdoors?" I asked. "You hate hiking." "Well, your father thought Lily would love it. She's such a curious little explorer, isn't she? Frank's already packed the cooler." I didn't say anything, just listened. "Oh, and Diana's coming too." Of course she was. I looked over at Lily, now awake and sitting up, having heard part of the conversation. "Mom," she chirped, "can I bring my magnifying glass? Maybe I'll find a rare bug." I smiled at her, but it felt hollow. "Sure, baby," my mother continued. "It'll be a day to remember." I bet it would. Saturday arrived under a sky as pale as porcelain, the kind of light that feels too quiet, too watchful. I woke up long before dawn, my body already bracing for something it couldn't name. Lily was still asleep, tangled in her pink comforter, one foot sticking out, her bunny tucked beneath her chin. I stared at her for a long while before moving. I packed methodically: sandwiches, fruit, water, first aid kit, extra socks, granola bars, even Lily's little sun hat despite the cold air. I didn't know what I was preparing for, only that I needed to be prepared. Habit, maybe. Or instinct. My hands moved on their own, while my mind stayed tangled in all the things I hadn't said out loud. Lily was up by 7, bouncing through the hallway with a green beanie pulled down over her curls and her tiny plastic magnifying glass swinging from her neck. "Today's adventure day," she declared, her voice full of joy that felt both contagious and dangerous. I smiled, swallowing the knot in my throat. Yep, adventure day. At exactly 8:10 a.m., my parents' gray Subaru pulled up in front of the house. My dad, Frank, was behind the wheel, looking oddly upbeat in his old fishing vest. Gloria sat beside him, already bundled in a fleece scarf, sunglasses perched low on her nose despite the early hour. In the back seat, Diana waved, her mouth curled in what I can only describe as a performance of warmth. She was wearing expensive hiking shoes, not a speck of dirt on them. Lily scrambled into the back with her usual excitement, and I followed, forcing my breath to remain steady. I noticed it immediately. There was no food in the car. No thermos of coffee, no actual picnic gear, unless you counted the single plastic grocery bag near my mom's feet. Just water bottles and what looked like a pair of gloves tossed casually in the back. That was the first real sign. The second came as we turned off the main road, heading onto a narrow gravel path that wound deeper into the woods than I remembered. "We used to come here as kids," Dad said casually. "But this trail is newer, real hidden gem." I looked around. The trees were thinner here, pine needles scattered thick across the dirt. The air smelled clean but cold. There were no other cars, no other hikers, just the hush of wind weaving through tall trees, and a path so narrow it could barely fit one vehicle. "How'd you even find this route?" I asked. "Oh, just a tip from someone at the lake," Mom replied breezily. "Frank scouted it last week." I said nothing. My stomach had begun to churn. We parked in a clearing near the edge of a gentle slope. From here I could see the blue stretch of the valley below, pine trees like toothpicks painted with reds and oranges. It was beautiful, too beautiful. Diana adjusted her sunglasses as we got out. "Come on," she said. "There's a great overlook just a short walk from here. The views are incredible." I glanced back at the car. Still no food, no blankets, no backpacks, just us. Lily grabbed my hand. "Can I run ahead a little?" "Only where I can see you," I said quickly, tightening my grip. We walked in near silence, shoes crunching against leaves, the crisp air slicing through the morning quiet. Diana kept glancing over her shoulder at me. Mom walked with exaggerated cheer, pointing at tree shapes and commenting on the smell of fall. Dad led the way, hands in his pockets, moving steadily up a path that narrowed the farther we went. About 10 minutes in, we veered onto a side trail, a dirt path that dipped then rose again, curling toward what I recognized now as the cliffside. The same one my dad used to avoid when we were kids because it was too steep, too loose, too risky. Now he was leading us straight there. Lily was still chatting about her leaf collection when Diana suddenly fell back to walk beside me. Her voice was low and calm. Too calm. "Rach, have you ever really thought about boarding school?" I stopped walking. "No," I said flatly. She raised an eyebrow. "Not even for the academic edge?" I looked at her, really looked at her. Her expression was measured, lips slightly parted like she was trying not to say too much. Or maybe trying not to say everything. "No," I repeated, "and I have no plans to." She shrugged. "There are things in life we can't control forever." That didn't sound like a suggestion. It sounded like a warning. Up ahead, I saw my mom and dad pause near the edge of the overlook. The drop beyond them was dizzying, hundreds of feet down to jagged rocks and pine needles. The valley spread out in peaceful silence. Lily ran ahead, turning back to wave. "Mom, I can see the whole mountain." I started walking faster. As I neared the edge, my eyes scanned everything. My mom's bag was limp at her side, too light to carry lunch. My dad had nothing in his hands. Diana was now right behind me. Then I saw it. A glance, a flick of my mom's eyes to Diana, a tiny nod, the kind you'd miss if you weren't watching. But I was. I stopped immediately and pulled Lily close, my fingers tightening around her wrist. "What's wrong?" she asked, confused. My voice was calm, too calm. "Stay right next to me, honey. Don't move unless I say." Dad smiled at me like everything was normal. "Come on, Rach, there's another ledge just a few feet ahead. It's even better. I took a picture there last week." "I'm good here," I replied. Diana stepped closer, her tone suddenly soft, coaxing. "Rachel, just for a second. I need to show you something." I turned sharply. "No." She reached for my arm. That's when everything shifted. I recoiled, pulling Lily behind me. "Don't touch me," I said through gritted teeth. But Diana's hand was still out, frozen in midair. "Rach, why are we really here?" I demanded. No one answered. Then my dad moved, so quickly it startled me. He reached out for Lily, crouching low, his voice syrupy. "Come here, sweetheart. Did you see that eagle? Let me show you." Lily blinked up at him, smiling. "Grandpa? Don't," I shouted, lunging forward. "Put her down." He lifted her with one arm, walking toward the cliff's edge like it was just another stroll. I grabbed his shoulder, screaming now, but before I could pull him back, I felt it, a sharp shove against my back. It was Gloria. Her face was blank, utterly blank. My feet slipped on the loose dirt, momentum pulling me forward. My hand reached blindly, catching a thin branch just in time to keep from tumbling over the edge. I dangled there, knees shaking, dirt sliding beneath my shoes. Diana stepped forward, her voice low, controlled. "I'm sorry, Rachel, but this is necessary. You're in the way." I looked up at her, my body trembling. "You don't get to decide this," I hissed. Frank turned back, still holding Lily. "She won't remember anything," he said softly. "It'll be quick." I didn't wait. I screamed, raw, primal, and launched myself off the edge, grabbing Lily's legs, yanking her back as hard as I could. Time exploded. Air rushed past us in howling gusts. Trees blurred above, rocks shattered skin. I wrapped myself around her, arms locked tight, and then we hit the world below. The world didn't stop when we fell. It just twisted, collapsed, and then swallowed us whole. I didn't scream. Not because I wasn't terrified, but because every instinct in my body had already been consumed by one single, desperate purpose: protect Lily. I wrapped myself around her, shielding her with everything I had left. My arms formed a cage, my back took the brunt. There was no time to think, no time to measure the drop or pray for a miracle. There was only the wind roaring in our ears, the sharp slap of branches against skin, and the endless, sickening lurch of gravity. I felt us hit once, twice, hard. Pain cracked through my shoulder and across my ribs. Something sharp tore through the side of my leg, and I heard Lily's scream, a high-pitched cry muffled against my chest. Then we slammed into the forest floor. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs. My head whipped sideways, and the world spun into a storm of color and static. But I didn't let go. I couldn't. Not even when my vision blurred and blood ran into my eye. Not even when the pain in my wrist made my whole arm go numb. I held her. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The silence that followed was deafening. No birdsong, no breeze, just the soft, unsteady sound of Lily's breathing, and my own heartbeat pounding like a war drum in my chest. "Mommy," she whimpered, her voice trembling. "I've got you," I whispered, though my mouth was full of blood. "You're okay? You're safe? I've got you." I couldn't tell if I was crying or if it was just the sting of dirt and blood in my eyes. Every inch of me ached. My right leg throbbed with something beyond bruising. My left wrist was bent at an unnatural angle, already beginning to swell. But none of that mattered. Lily was alive, breathing, in my arms. I blinked up through the trees, the jagged limbs stretching high above us like the ribs of some massive broken beast. Pale sunlight filtered through the canopy. I could still hear faint echoes from the clifftop above, muffled voices, footsteps shifting on gravel. Then I heard her, my mother's voice. "Do you see anything?" "No, not moving," came Frank's reply, cold and emotionless. "Good," Diana said. "No one comes out here. No one's going to find them." I instinctively pressed my good hand over Lily's mouth. Her eyes widened, but she didn't make a sound. She understood. Somehow, she understood far too much for a 6-year-old. "Let's go," Mom added. "If they're alive, they won't be for long." The footsteps faded. Still, we didn't move. We lay perfectly still beneath the brush, Lily's face buried against my chest, our bodies shivering despite the late morning sun. I waited until I could no longer hear them. No more twigs snapping, no more crunching leaves. Only then did I loosen my grip. Lily looked up at me, tears streaking her cheeks, her bottom lip trembling. "Mom, are we going to die?" "No," I said fiercely, even as pain bloomed fresh in my ribs. "Not today. Not ever. I promise." She nodded, but her little hands clung tighter to my shirt. I could feel her heart hammering, a frantic beat pressed against my own. We stayed there in the quiet for what felt like hours, listening to every sound, flinching at every gust of wind. And then, softly, Lily whispered something that made my blood run cold. "I think I know why they did it." "What do you mean?" I whispered back. "I heard Aunt Diana talking to Dad, in the garden, when I was hiding behind the rose bushes. She said, 'It'll all be over soon. We just need Mom to say yes to the picnic.' Daddy said, 'Just follow the plan. The insurance money's coming.'" I froze. Insurance. It was more than just a custody grab. More than just some power play. They had counted on our deaths. They had calculated it, planned it. The updated policy, the witness signatures, the sudden invitations, the cold detachment from my parents. They hadn't just wanted Lily. They wanted me gone. I swallowed the rising bile and forced a calm I didn't feel. "You're so brave, sweetheart," I said. "Thank you for telling me. That helps more than you know." I checked the backpack. Miraculously, it had landed not far from us. Most of our supplies were scattered, but I found one bottle of water, a small towel, and a crumpled granola bar. I used the towel to clean the scrape on Lily's cheek, biting my lip to stay steady. My body was on fire. My leg wouldn't hold weight, my wrist was useless, but I still had one good arm, and I had Lily. That was enough. "We have to move," I told her. "Slow, careful, but we can't stay here." She looked terrified. "But you're hurt." "I know," I said gently. "That's why I need your help. I can lean on you. Can you do that for me?" She nodded, eyes brimming with tears again. "I can do it, Mommy. I can help." I broke a thick branch to use as a makeshift crutch, and together, inch by inch, we began to climb out of that ravine. Every step sent searing pain through my leg, but I bit down on it, hard, drawing blood just to keep from screaming. Lily stayed beside me the whole time, her tiny hand wrapped around mine, guiding me when the ground turned loose or slick. We didn't talk much. There wasn't energy for it, just movement. Determined, slow, ragged movement. After maybe 2 hours, I couldn't tell anymore, we reached a flatter patch of forest near a small creek. My strength was gone. I collapsed to my knees, gasping. Lily sat beside me, rubbing my shoulder. Then we heard something. A voice. A man's voice. "Do you see anyone?" A pause. "Wait, someone's there." Branches rustled. 2 figures emerged through the trees, an elderly couple, maybe in their 70s, the man holding a walking stick, the woman gasping as she saw us. She ran to us immediately, kneeling beside me. "Dear God, what happened? Are you hurt?" I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I was beyond speech. I could only point to Lily, to her, to say, "Save her." The woman, Margaret, I would later learn, took Lily into her arms while the man pulled out a phone and called for help. "I don't know how long they've been out here," he said. "The woman can't walk. The child looks shaken. Please hurry." The world blurred. Sirens screamed in the distance, then faded into the background of my fading consciousness. But Lily's hand never let go of mine. Before I slipped under, I felt her lips near my ear. "Mommy, I told them you saved me. I told them everything." I woke to the antiseptic scent of a hospital room, bleach, plastic, faint traces of rubbing alcohol, and the persistent hum of machines. The light was soft, filtered through beige curtains, and the world moved in slow motion, like it had to be careful not to startle me. My left arm was in a cast, my right leg propped up in a sling, and my entire body ached in places I didn't know could hurt. But I was alive. Next to the bed, curled in an oversized chair with her bunny in one arm and her thumb in her mouth, was Lily. Her face was smudged with faint scratches and tape where a small bandage crossed her cheek. Her hair had come loose from the braid I'd done the day before the fall, and it now spilled across her shoulder like a wild cinnamon cloud. I didn't want to wake her. I just stared at her for a while, letting the quiet wash over me. But before long, the door creaked open, and a man stepped inside. He wasn't wearing a lab coat, but his demeanor screamed authority. Plain clothes, calm posture, the kind of walk that said he wasn't just visiting. He gave me a small, respectful nod. "Miss Carter?" he asked gently. Yes, I croaked. My throat felt raw, like I'd swallowed smoke. I'm Detective Miles Callahan. I'm with the Oakfield County Police Department. I know you've been through hell, and I won't press you for more than you can give, but I do need to ask a few questions, if you're ready. I glanced at Lily. She's been incredible, he said, lowering his voice. Told us more than most adults could have. My chest tightened. I nodded slowly. Callahan sat beside the bed, pulling out a notepad. Can you tell me, in your own words, what happened at Saddle Creek Ridge? I told him everything. Slowly, carefully. I didn't embellish, didn't dramatize. Just the truth. The strange invitations, the way Diana kept pushing for guardianship, the papers in Eric's coat, the hike, the moment my father lifted Lily and how my mother shoved me. The fall. The silence, the betrayal. When I finished, Callahan didn't move for a long moment. Then he flipped through his notes. You mentioned life insurance, he said, flipping open a folder from his briefcase. You should know, your policy was updated 4 months ago. I saw it, I whispered. $3 million. Eric listed himself as the only beneficiary. Callahan nodded grimly. Correct. He told the insurer it was for family protection in case of a tragic accident. The witness who signed the amendment was Diana Myers. The room spun slightly. Even though I already knew, hearing it spoken aloud anchored the betrayal deeper in my chest. There's more, he continued. We traced a $500,000 bank transfer from your mother's account to Eric's, just 1 week before the hike. The memo line read, "Final payment for the plan." It took me a second to find my voice. They were all in on it. All signs point to a coordinated conspiracy. Your husband, your sister, your parents. I looked at Lily. She was still sleeping, her small chest rising and falling. Why? I murmured. Why would they do this? Callahan didn't answer right away. Sometimes people convince themselves that money solves everything, that love and family are secondary, or maybe they just stop seeing others as people and start seeing them as problems. There was no comfort in that. Where are they now? I asked. We issued warrants the moment you gave your statement, he said. But when our team arrived at their homes, both Eric and Diana had already vanished. My heart dropped. We found Eric's car near a small private airstrip, Callahan continued. No plane was logged, but we think he was planning to flee. The flight was canceled at the last minute. Maybe he got spooked. So they're still out there? Yes, he said, but not for long. We've issued federal alerts. We're coordinating with multiple states. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed justice would come quickly. Or cleanly. 3 days later, I was transferred to a private recovery suite under watch. 2 armed officers were stationed outside at all times. Lily was placed under temporary care with a social worker during the investigation, but she visited every afternoon, her energy and voice growing stronger by the day. When Callahan returned, he was carrying a thick case file, and his expression was different now, focused, almost personal. We got something, he said. A toll booth camera caught Diana driving out of Oregon, heading south toward Nevada. We've escalated the warrant. I leaned forward slightly despite the pull in my ribs. And Eric? He used an alias, Callahan said. Daniel Morrison. He tried booking a private flight with that name, same departure window as the airstrip we searched. But he never got on. No, Callahan confirmed, but he's running. That makes him visible. Sloppy. The following morning, I was visited by a government-appointed attorney who'd been assigned to the case. He carried with him the digital copies of Eric's text messages to Diana, recovered from a phone police found in his abandoned car. You've got everything you need, the attorney told me. Text records, financial transactions, your daughter's eyewitness testimony, attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud. They'll be prosecuted to the fullest extent. The door opened again, and Lily ran in, the social worker trailing behind her. She jumped onto the bed with a little less caution than she should have, but I didn't care. I caught her, held her close. Mommy, she said breathlessly. I told them everything. I remembered it all. The phone call, the garden talk, even Grandpa saying it'll be fine if you just didn't fight. I blinked back tears. You did? She nodded proudly. Detective Callahan said I was brave. He walked in behind her, smiling softly. She's more than brave. She's the key to all of this. I stared at my daughter, torn between pride and sorrow. She should have been talking about cartoons, birthday parties, or what she wanted to be when she grew up, not remembering a murder plot. Were you scared? I asked her. She looked at me, small but unwavering. I was. But I knew, if I told the truth, you wouldn't have to be scared anymore. I pulled her into my arms, her body warm against my chest, and I let myself cry. Not because I was afraid anymore, but because this tiny, beautiful girl had carried the weight of survival like it was her birthright. And because somewhere in all this pain, the truth had found its voice. Through her. 3 days after Lily's testimony, the knock on my hospital door came just after sunrise. The nurse had just finished checking my vitals, and Lily was still asleep on the fold-out cot beside me, her bunny tucked under her chin, like always. I expected it to be another quiet check-in from the social worker. But instead, Detective Callahan stepped in, his shoulders stiff with urgency, a file clutched in his left hand, and a subtle gleam of purpose behind his tired eyes. "We got them," he said, voice low but unmistakably firm. I sat up straighter despite the ache that shot through my back. "Both?" He nodded. Eric was found in a rental cabin near the Nevada border. Tried to burn paperwork, files, hard drives, even his phone. But our team got there before he could destroy everything. I blinked, barely believing. And Diana? She was arrested yesterday afternoon at a roadside gas station in southern Idaho. She'd swapped vehicles with an acquaintance off the record, but a security camera flagged her face. She tried to deny it at first, but we had too much. I exhaled slowly, the breath shaking as it left me. I didn't realize I was gripping the edge of my blanket until my knuckles turned white. "They're both being extradited back to Oregon," Callahan continued. "As for your parents, Walter and Gloria, we've issued subpoenas, and we have phone records. One call between Gloria and Eric the night before the hike. She said, and I quote, 'Just make sure she doesn't resist. Once she signs the new documents, we're done. No more complications.'" I closed my eyes for a moment. My entire life, every family dinner, every holiday, every quiet Sunday visit, had been leading to this, and I hadn't seen it. Or maybe I had, but I'd wanted to believe I was wrong. That no one who raised you, no one who called themselves family, could ever look at your child and see a dollar sign. Lily stirred in her sleep and mumbled something unintelligible. I looked at her, memorizing every freckle on her nose, the way her lips twitched slightly when she dreamed. I wasn't fighting for justice anymore. I was fighting for her future, for the right to raise her without fear, without shadows in the closet wearing familiar faces. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of statements, preparations, and meetings with my attorney. I was fitted with a walking boot and crutches, but the pain in my legs still pulsed with every step. The cast on my wrist made writing slow, but I signed every page he put in front of me, every affidavit, every form, every document that brought me closer to holding them accountable. And then came the day I'd been waiting for. The trial. It began 8 months after that fall at Saddle Creek Ridge. By then, I could walk without crutches, though my legs still ached on rainy days. The fracture in my arm had mostly healed, but the scar across my shoulder never quite faded. I didn't mind. It reminded me I was still here. I arrived at the Oakfield County Courthouse in a wheelchair that first day, not because I couldn't walk, but because the weight of it all, the sheer emotional gravity, pressed harder than I expected. Lily walked beside me wearing a pale blue dress she'd picked out herself. "Because it's your favorite color, Mommy," she'd said that morning. Her voice had lost some of its softness since the incident, but in its place was something stronger, steadier. Inside the courtroom, the air was so still it felt like holding your breath for too long. Eric now, stripped of husbandhood, sat with his lawyer in a gray suit, his face expressionless. Diana followed shortly after, her hair tied back, her lips tight, eyes flicking across the room without ever landing on me. My parents came in last, looking smaller than I remembered, as though the weight of their choices had finally begun to show in their posture. The prosecutor began with a blistering opening statement, laying out timelines, evidence, and motive, the updated insurance policy, the banking transactions, the hike, the push, the plan. Each fact fell like a hammer, cold, precise, unflinching. When it was my turn to testify, I was wheeled to the front of the courtroom, facing the people I had once called family. My hands didn't shake, my voice didn't crack. I told them what they had done, what I had lived through, how I had seen the flick of my mother's eyes, the reach of Diana's hand, the calm detachment in my father's voice as he carried Lily toward the cliff. I didn't cry, not even when I looked at Eric and said, "You didn't just betray me. You tried to erase me. And you failed." The judge's gaze never left mine. The courtroom was so quiet, you could hear the echo of every word I spoke bounce off the polished wood. Lily's testimony was played through a pre-recorded video. She sat on screen with a quiet calmness that stunned everyone, speaking clearly, truthfully. She told them about hiding in the rose bushes, about what she overheard about the fall, about how she thought I was dead, about how she thought she'd be next. By the time the video ended, even the judge's voice had softened. Eric took the stand during the defense and painted himself as a victim. "Rachel controlled everything," he said bitterly. "She made me feel suffocated. I just wanted to be free. I wanted a different life. Diana, she offered a way out." I sat motionless as he spoke, listening to his rehearsed narrative. Diana's defense was colder, more calculated. Rachel didn't know how to manage stress. She was overwhelmed. I was trying to help. No apology, no regret, just a PR campaign wrapped in legal strategy. When the judge finally asked if they had anything to say before sentencing, Eric stared straight ahead. "I just wanted a better life," he repeated. My father mumbled, "She didn't deserve that life." My mother said nothing. The judge's gavel rang like a gunshot through the silence. Eric Carter and Diana Myers, sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for first-degree attempted murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. No eligibility for parole. Walter and Gloria Myers, 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder and child endangerment. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for months. I didn't smile. I didn't sob. I just closed my eyes and let the sound of justice settle in my bones. Outside the courthouse, people I hadn't seen in years came up to us. Old neighbors, a nurse from Lily's school. Women I'd never met before, some with tears in their eyes, hugging me, whispering, "You survived for all of us who never could." I didn't know what to say, so I knelt beside Lily, wrapped my arms around her, and whispered in her ear, "We did it, baby. Now we get to live." We didn't go back to our old house in Oregon after the trial. The prosecutor advised against it, and deep down, I knew I couldn't walk through those rooms again. Not the kitchen where I'd packed Lily's lunches while Eric planned my death. Not the living room where Diana once laughed over holiday wine. And certainly not the hallway where Lily had asked, "Will you still visit me if I don't live with you anymore?" That house was gone to me. Even if the walls still stood, the warmth had vanished long before the betrayal ever surfaced. Instead, I requested a transfer through the Witness Protection Program. A new identity, a new address, a new beginning. Somewhere no one knew our names. Somewhere Lily could grow up without whispers or newspaper headlines. Somewhere I could finally exhale. We were relocated to Evergreen Valley, Colorado, a quiet mountain town with wide skies, endless pine forests, and a kind of silence that felt earned rather than empty. The snow hadn't fully melted when we arrived. Crocuses were just beginning to push their way through the thawing earth, like tiny signs from the universe that even frozen ground could make room for something new. The only person I told ahead of time was Grace, an old high school friend I hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade. We hadn't been close in the traditional sense, but I remembered how steady she had been during the chaos of teenage years. When I called her, voice shaking with exhaustion and shame and fear, she didn't ask for the full story. She just said, "Come, stay as long as you need, we've got space." Grace lived with her husband and 2 kids in a cedar cabin tucked into the edge of the woods, about 15 minutes from town. The place smelled like pine and fresh bread and safety. It wasn't ours, but it was safe. And that was enough. I started working part-time at a small clinic in town. The owner, Dr. Caroline Harrow, was in her 60s, with sharp eyes and a heart hidden behind gruff mannerisms. When I interviewed, she looked me over for a long time, then said, "I don't care about your resume. I care that you know how to listen and don't flinch at hard truths. Can you do that?" I nodded. "Good," she said. "We open at 7. Wear comfortable shoes." There was no grand rebirth, no dramatic shift overnight, but there were small things. The rhythm of drawing blood, organizing charts, wiping down counters, the smell of antiseptic, the hum of old fluorescent lights. These things grounded me again. They made me feel useful. Steady, like I hadn't been completely broken. Lily enrolled at the elementary school down the road from Grace's. At first she was quiet, withdrawn. She sat alone during recess, watched the other kids play from a distance, always clutching her bunny or her magnifying glass like talismans. But children are resilient in a way adults forget how to be. One afternoon, her teacher called me. "Rachel," she said, "Lily drew a picture today. It was a little girl and a woman standing under a sun with long beams. I asked who it was. She said, 'That's me and my mom. Because we walked through a really dark night, and now we're in the light.'" I had to sit down when I heard that. We started therapy shortly after, just once a week. A specialist named Dr. Helen Monroe, who worked primarily with survivors of trauma. She never pushed, never asked Lily to explain the fall, the betrayal, the horror of it all. She just let her draw. Build things with sand. Talk about dreams and monsters and colors. With me, she was more direct. "You don't need to forgive them," she said during our first session. "You just need to focus on survival, on what you want to protect, and let everything else burn if it needs to." Week by week, the heaviness started to lift. Lily began coming home with stories about a boy who spilled his milk and didn't cry, about a teacher who did silly voices while reading, about a new girl who had the same hair clip. Her laughter came easier. Her shoulders dropped. One day, she even left her bunny on her bed instead of bringing it to school. That Friday, I came home to find her spinning in circles in Grace's backyard, arms wide, scarf trailing behind her like a kite string. She looked free. About 3 months after we settled in, I was invited to a parent meeting at Lily's school. It was for a spring field trip. I arrived early, my heart still tense from years of bracing for the worst. That's where I met him, David Clark, the school principal. He was tall, maybe early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and thin-rimmed glasses. His handshake was warm, his smile slow and genuine. After the meeting, I was struggling to untangle Lily's jacket from a door handle when he approached. "You're Lily's mom, right?" "I'm David," he said. "She's a wonderful student, bright, kind." "Thank you," I replied, unsure of how to respond to kindness when it wasn't laced with expectation. "She smiled on the playground today," he added. "That's all that matters." After that, I began seeing him more often, at pickup, at the library, at the Saturday market, where Lily begged for caramel popcorn, and I tried not to hover. We'd talk. At first, just pleasantries. Then deeper things. I told him I worked at the clinic. He told me about his years as a math teacher before he stepped into administration. He never asked about the scar across my shoulder, or why I sometimes flinched when someone touched my back unexpectedly. He never asked why Lily sometimes woke up crying or why we had no family visits. But he listened. He waited. And when I was ready, I told him everything. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't say, "That's awful." He just sat there in silence, letting the truth settle between us like dust in a quiet room. Lily's 8th birthday came on a chilly spring day. I planned something small, a cake, some balloons, a few of Grace's neighbors who had children around Lily's age. But Grace had other plans. She invited everyone, our coworkers, Lily's teachers, even David, who showed up with a box of cupcakes and a storybook wrapped in tissue paper. Lily ran through the backyard laughing, her purple dress catching the wind like wings. I stood in the kitchen, watching through the window as David helped her re-tie the scarf around her neck. She beamed up at him, and for a moment my chest ached, not from pain, but from something gentler, something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. After the party, while Lily dozed off on the couch, sticky-fingered and full of cake, David stayed to help clean up. He handed me a small envelope. "It's from the school," he said. "A little gift we do for students who've come through something hard. Just a couple movie tickets and a new book." I took it, feeling my throat tighten. He hesitated before leaving. "Rachel, I don't know what brought you here. And you don't need to tell me, but I just want you to know, what you and Lily brought to this town, it's something real, something good." I didn't speak, I just nodded. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she reached for my hand and whispered, "Mom, can I call Mr. David Uncle David? He feels like family." I smiled, brushing her hair back gently. "You can call him anything you want, sweetheart, as long as it makes you feel safe and happy." Outside, the snow had started falling again, slow and soft, covering everything. A clean slate. We had lost everything. But here, in this little town, surrounded by pine trees and possibility, We were finding something even better. We were finding peace. It didn't happen all at once, the healing. It never does. It comes in pieces. Quiet mornings where no one is watching the door, school notes written in crayon, the soft click of a front porch light, turned off without fear. It's laughter that doesn't feel guilty, dreams that don't end in screams, and the way a girl says mommy like she's finally stopped checking to see if the world will take me away again. Lily and I were living, really living, for the first time in years. Not just surviving the ghosts of betrayal, but moving forward in a place that didn't know us by headlines or court transcripts. In Evergreen Valley, we weren't the mother and daughter who almost died. We were just Rachel and Lily, and that was more than enough. One afternoon in late spring, I stood in our small kitchen at Grace's, watching Lily chase bubbles across the yard. Her scarf flapped behind her like a ribbon in the wind. She twirled and laughed and collapsed into the grass, eyes squinting against the sunlight. I never got tired of watching her in those moments, unguarded, unafraid, whole. Grace came up beside me, drying her hands on a dish towel. "You're doing it," she said, her voice soft. "You're building a life." I nodded, tears prickling. Some days I believe that. Some days is enough. A few weeks later, Lily brought home a permission slip for a field trip to a nearby nature reserve. I had signed a dozen of these back in Oregon, never thinking twice. But this one made my hands tremble a little. Not because I didn't trust the school, but because the woods, any woods, still brought the memory of that cliffside like a phantom shadow. Still, Lily looked up at me with so much hope. "The teacher said you can come too. You can be a parent chaperone if you want." I smiled. "You and me, always together, remember?" She beamed, threw her arms around me, and whispered, "That's our rule." The trip came and went without incident. We hiked, took pictures of pine cones and moss, and watched Lily give an impromptu speech about heart-shaped leaves to a group of amused second graders. I took more photos than necessary, each one a small act of defiance against what had nearly been taken from us. That night, when the house had quieted and Lily had drifted into sleep, I stepped onto the porch. The stars hung low and bright, like someone had dusted the sky with diamonds. I leaned against the railing, breathed in the scent of pine, and let the cool mountain air fill my lungs. David showed up not long after, carrying a thermos of chamomile tea and 2 tin mugs. He didn't say much, he rarely did, but he sat beside me, sipped in silence, and let the quiet speak for us. "I've been thinking about something," I said eventually, my voice just above a whisper. "About family." He turned to me, waiting. "My whole life, I thought family was something you're born into, something permanent. But blood didn't protect me. It tried to bury me." His eyes softened. "Family isn't who you share history with. It's who stays when the history ends." I looked at him then, really looked, and felt the weight of all the moments he hadn't asked for details but had shown up anyway. The field trip, the birthday party, the quiet nights, the scarf he helped Lily tie like it was the most important job in the world. "I think Lily's starting to believe you're part of ours," I said. He smiled. "Then I better live up to it." Life settled into a rhythm after that. Work, school, therapy. We found a little rental cabin of our own, not far from Grace's, with a red front door and creaky steps that Lily called squeaky music. I bought furniture secondhand, painted the walls soft colors, and let Lily pick wildflowers to place in old mason jars on the windowsills. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, and that made it sacred. One Saturday morning, while I folded laundry and Lily colored at the kitchen table, she asked something that caught me off guard. "Do you think people can come back from being bad?" I looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean like Daddy, or Aunt Diana, or Grandma. Do you think they ever feel sorry?" I sat beside her, choosing my words carefully. "I don't know if they feel sorry. I hope they do. But whether they do or don't, that's not something we carry anymore. That belongs to them." She nodded slowly. "I'm glad we left. I like who we are here." "Me too, sweetheart," I thought. "Me too." Summer came with long, golden days and lazy evenings. Lily joined a local reading club at the library, where she fell in love with books about adventure and bravery and girls who weren't afraid to speak up. She started sleeping through the night more often than not. Her laughter grew louder, her drawings more colorful. One afternoon, she showed me a picture she'd drawn at school. It was of a house with a red door, trees all around, and a family standing outside. A woman, a little girl, and a man with glasses and gray hair. "Who's that?" I asked, pointing at the man. "That's Mr. David," she said matter-of-factly. "He belongs with us." I didn't correct her. I just held the picture close. It was a quiet Sunday evening in late July when David finally asked if we wanted to join him for dinner. Just the three of us. No school event, no group setting, just family. Lily insisted on wearing her purple dress. I wore a blouse that had survived all the moves, the one piece of clothing that still made me feel like myself. We ate spaghetti and garlic bread in David's backyard, under string lights that swayed in the breeze. Lily made up a story about a squirrel who opened a lemonade stand, and David listened like it was a Pulitzer Prize pitch. After Lily went inside to play with David's dog, he turned to me. "Rachel," he said quietly, "I don't know what the future looks like for you or for me, but I do know this. If you ever want to build something again, I'd be proud to be part of it." I didn't answer right away. My eyes welled, and I let them. "You already are." That night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she curled against me and whispered, "Mom, we're a real family now, huh?" I kissed her forehead. The realest kind. The kind that chooses each other, that fights for light after the darkest nights. That builds something beautiful out of broken pieces. As I stood by the window, watching the stars return one by one, I knew something I hadn't known for a long time. We weren't victims, we were survivors. And better than that, we were finally free. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of Rachel and Lily's story. It wasn't an easy journey, but perhaps that's the point. Life rarely offers easy paths, especially when betrayal comes from the ones we trust most. But this story teaches us something deeply important. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by love, loyalty, and the courage to choose what's right, even when it's hard. Rachel fought not just to survive, but to rebuild a life worth living, for herself and her daughter. And in doing so, she found something even greater: peace, trust, and a chosen family who stood by her side. That's the power of resilience. We'd love to know, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of someone you love, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more real, powerful stories to life. Stories about strength, survival, and the triumph of the human spirit. We'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay strong, stay kind, and never forget, you are not alone.